Hi guys, welcome to another tutorial in the Photography Fundamentals Getting Started in Photography series. And in this one we're going to be looking at the camera, more specifically the control and layout of the camera, so the control dials, the buttons, which buttons will typically do what, and to help you get your camera set up and up and running out there shooting sooner. Now we'll be looking at my camera, which is a Canon DSLR. Typically DSLRs have a very similar button layout anyway. Some may move, yes, fine, menu systems will be different, but it's more of the basic controls and dials and what they do and what they are for. So without further ado, we'll get into that now. Hi guys, and here we are looking at the top of my Canon DSLR. Now please remember your camera may not quite look the same, buttons may be slightly different places, the labels on the buttons may slightly change. Again, this is just a general primer. Now we have, of course, the mode dial, and we've looked at this in more detail on the blog as well, and in a video where we change the exposure mode we want to work in: bulb, manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, program mode, creative auto, auto, and so forth. Now bear in mind, on some cameras you may have to depress a button in the middle of this to be able to turn the dial. It acts as a security lock to prevent you from knocking the settings or changing the shooting mode inadvertently. For example, if you're carrying your camera on a sling strap. It was offered as an upgrade for the 5D Mark IIs. I never bothered with it because it was like £100 to send it in, and screw that. So next we have the hot shoe. This is where you would mount your speed light, your flash, or your wireless trigger if you're working with off-camera lighting. It is brand specific typically. The hot shoe, it will work with simple triggers, simple flashes that just fire from the center pin. The additional pins here tend to be for the TTL, which is camera proprietary automatic exposure for flash. Next we have the diopter for adjusting the viewfinder to suit your vision. Whether you wear glasses or not, you can adjust it there. We have the viewfinder cover, and again that's just a rubber cover. You're probably going to lose those. I have in the past. Amazingly this one stayed on, although to be fair I think I've glued it. Anyway, and that's where the viewfinder is there. Now on this camera we can also see a top display here, which refers settings that we are currently set at and working within. Now not all cameras have this. Typically the prosumer and professional cameras do. So your lower end camera, if you're shooting with an entry-level one, may not have this. Please bear that in mind. Now as I change the modes, you can see we're in aperture priority. Now the camera works out a shutter speed based on the ISO that it's at, and the metering mode, shutter priority, okay, and then it works out an aperture and so forth, okay, auto and what have you. Now on this panel, it does advise you of the settings that you're currently working at: white balance, auto white balance, AWB, battery life, RAW, shutter speed 125th, aperture of f11, ISO of 100, and we're on one shot for the focusing mode, not continuous focus, for example, and it also tells you the metering number of shots left on the card. This will probably differ to your camera. Again, check the manual, check for tutorial videos specific to your camera as well. This is just a primer. Now the buttons along the top here, typically again found on the more professional cameras, allow you quick access to certain settings, such as the ISO, to be able to change that there. The AF drive, so for continuous, automatic single shot and continuous and so forth, or one shot there. The white balance or metering mode can be changed. Typically, one mode is changed by the top dial here, the other by the rear dial on the camera, which we'll get to shortly. Okay, we can change, of course, these modes on here. Again, this will slightly differ on your camera. Now, to the sides of the camera here, we have the camera strap anchor points. Speaking of an anchor point, this is for the strap system that I use, so do ignore this for now, but your camera straps will fit onto there. Now we can also see that I've mounted a lens to the camera, and again, with this being just a primer to the layout of such a camera, if you're coming from a compact, this is going to be totally alien and new. A bridge camera, again, it's not going to be the same. This will be something new for you as well. So with a DSLR or mirrorless camera, we have a option to change lenses. This is a 24 to 105 on here at the moment. You'll have a zoom ring on your lens, and a focus ring at the front of the lens. That may be reversed on some lens depending on manufacturer, okay, or camera brand, so please bear that in mind. I do also have a lens hood, which we can't see that's out of shot at the moment, on the end of this lens, and we'll see that shortly. So what we'll do now, we'll have a look at some of the other buttons and dials, just again the general layout of these kind of cameras. Okay, here we are looking at the back of a camera. This is a DSLR, a Canon DSLR. Yours may be slightly different, but we'll have a look at some of the basic dials and features that are on the rear of a camera. Now, what we currently have, if I press play, is the LCD on the back here, and this is where your images will be displayed. It's also going to display the live view image if your camera has live view. Most do these days, and this is something that you would use shooting macro, still life, and certainly if you're shooting video with your DSLR, which again most of them will do. So we'll turn that off. Now we also have the viewfinder that we would look through to frame the shot. You can of course use live view like you would with a bridge or compact camera, but your camera's not going to be as steady when you're hand holding that way. The contact with your eye as you hold the camera is going to make for a much sharper, steadier shot. And we have the cover for the eyepiece there. The 3 or 4 holes you see here is for a speaker for playback of video audio. You may find something like that placed around your body. Please ignore this lower section here. This is a battery grip that I have installed on my cameras. You don't have to have one of those. Not really important. We're looking at mainly the controls on the camera here. Now we also have a number of buttons, and we have a control dial on the back here, which is when I play back, I can cycle through images this way. This will also change settings on the camera. So if I'm on the shutter speed, for example, here, I can change it that way, or of course use that dial. If I'm not on the quick control screen here, then I will be using one to do the shutter speed, one to do the aperture. Okay, when I'm in manual. So the rear dial will do one, the top dial on the front near the shutter release will do the other. Most cameras who don't have the top LCD plate that we saw before will of course use a quick menu system such as this to change to the aperture ISO values, to get into those screens to change those parameters there. Okay, so you'll typically be reviewing the settings and changing them on the rear LCD, certainly on the lower end or consumer cameras. Now furthermore, on the back of this camera as well, there we go, that was from a workshop. That one's overexposed. You can see a blinking highlights here. Just to mention this, that's what telling me that the jumper is overexposed. Okay, the blinkies highlight ones. We had a look at this previously in other videos. Now furthermore, on the back of the LCD here, we have nearby the power button. That may be at the top on the camera, a control dial with a set option button. The joystick that you see here may or may not be on yours. A recording LED there, which when you take a picture, it will light up red to let you know it's writing to the card. You have options here to exposure lock, change your autofocus points, and start or stop autofocus, back button focus that you can set on cameras. Most of them will allow you to do that. Notice that these two buttons have additional functionality here on the rear for zooming in and out of a picture, like so. Now you will also have options to get to the menus and info. These buttons along the side here, menu, information, to cycle through the information on a picture. Okay, where we will have the histogram, shooting information, and a playback, like so. Play or not, delete the image, which I do not want to do, nope. And of course, picture styles, which may or may not be an option on your camera. With a quick button, it may be a separate button. So just a general overview of the layout of a camera. You may find that the lower end cameras, instead of having the jog dial here, you would press your autofocus select button and then use the dials to cycle through. But you may have a separate button on the back that you would hold and then use the button near the shutter release to change your aperture when you're working in manual. So when it's released, it does shutter speed. When you hold it, it does aperture. Typically that's the lower end Canon DSLRs that do that. Maybe others will as well. So what we'll do now, we'll take a look at the other controls and dials and features on the camera to get you guys up to speed and out there shooting sooner. Okay, looking at one side of the camera, or the right hand side if you will, where the hand grip is, you have your control dials here, shutter button here. Again, please ignore this bottom half of the camera, that's the battery grip. Just looking at this side here, we can see more clearly the strap mount there and the card door here. Now, some cameras will use different card types than what mine does, and some will have dual card slots as well. There's typically just one door that will open to reveal the cards, okay, and then within the card slot, if I just turn that around slightly for you, we will see the card slot here and the compact flash card that it nearly spat out on the floor. It's a bit aggressive, the spring in this one. So my cameras use compact flash cards. Yours will more than likely be using SD cards or SDHC cards, much smaller card and much smaller card slot. Some cameras will have dual card slots where you put one card type in one slot and another card type, usually an SD card, in another slot. Most pro cameras have compact flash and SD. The backup card slot is the SD card slot typically, although you can use it as a primary. And the whole reason really for having dual slots is for redundancy and backup. You can shoot files raw to one card and to the other as well for redundancy, so if you lose one card or one card fails, you're still good to go. Now, one thing to note when you're dealing with card slots is when they are open, okay, so when the door is actually released and open, the camera will actually switch off and power down. This is so you can safely remove the card without any worries. As soon as you plug the card back in, still nothing, but as soon as we close the door, then the camera is back to life and back to working again. Just a safety feature that way. Watch out if you're using a camera with compact flash cards, because the springs can sometimes be quite aggressive. I've had this thing spit cards on the floor before now. They're pretty robust, but just watch out that it doesn't spit the card out on you. So what we'll do is we'll flip the camera around and we'll have a look at the other side. Okay, and here we are looking at the other side of the camera. Now, on this side of the camera we can see a bit more of the lens. There's the lens hood. Always recommend using those even if it's not sunny. It helps to protect the lens. Now, on this lens here in particular, where we have the zoom ring, the focus ring, and then the zoom ring here. And we also have image stabilization switch here for on and off, and autofocus and manual focus. Usually with DSLRs it's on the lens itself. Some mirrorless systems, that button and feature is actually on the body of the camera itself. Check your manuals, of course. So if we turn it to manual focus, it's manual focus at this point, and we would use the focus ring here. Autofocus, there we go, we're on autofocus. Now, looking at the side of the camera, again ignore the battery grip. We can see the mode dial that we looked at before, and we've looked at in more detail as well. The camera strap loop, let's get that out of the way. And what we're really looking at on the side of the camera here is the ports that are behind these flaps here. Now, most cameras will have maybe one cover rather than two, and it's where things like the USB port, the plug-in for the remote trigger, microphone will plug in, HDMI cable if you're trying to pump the video from your camera to a TV, or audio visual out. Now, if we open up these covers here, these again are just to stop dust and rain getting in. We see the ports here. Now, some of these ports may not be on your cameras, these are a little bit older, but we have the mic input, the remote trigger for this camera. Typically it's done by USB these days. All cameras have wireless, fancy. Flash sync cable, good old PC flash sync cable. Never use it, never use it, because we're on wireless triggers these days. There you go. And in the other one here, if I can get it open, well, shows how often I open these. We have the AV out, audio visual out, basic composite audio visual out, USB for linking to a computer for offloading images, although I do recommend using a separate card reader, and the HDMI out for pumping the video to a screen. Never used it. I do not even know if that works. I suppose I'd have to check that when I sell the camera. So, right, that's just a quick look at this side of the camera. We can see, of course, some other buttons here as well, and we'll have a closer look at those as we flip the camera around to look at the front. Okay, moving towards the front of the camera. These buttons here that we can see that are near the badges, name badge of the camera, you've got a depth of field preview button, which will preview your depth of field through your lens. Basically, if you've got an aperture set of f/22, the aperture doesn't stay like that when you're looking through the viewfinder because you will be able to see nothing. It stays open and it stops down to that aperture as you take the picture. This allows you to stop the lens down and preview what the depth of field will look like. Relatively pointless button, to be honest with you. I wish I could customize it on this camera, and you can't, because looking through a viewfinder to try and see the difference in depth of field between settings, not really going to cut it. You're best looking at the full preview on the pictures on the back of the camera or on a monitor at home later. Anyway, it's there. We also have the lens release button on the side. So as I hold that, I can then release the lens from the camera. Okay, like so. And to mount the lens, you would line up the dot, red dot to red dot. It may be a white dot on your camera. Okay, and turn it until it's locked there. So what we'll do, we'll turn the camera around full front to have a look at some of the other features on there, and we'll have a closer look at the mirror and the sensor as well. Okay, and welcome to the front of your camera, or my camera, more to the point. Looking at the front of the camera, again, ignore the battery grip for now. We're looking at the main section on the camera here. Usually you're going to find the brand, okay, that lets everybody know that you're shooting Canon or Nikon or whatever. You've got the shutter button that we saw before. You can see part of the top controls here. Okay, mode dial, of course, like so. We had a look briefly then just at the lens release button and the depth of field preview button. Pointless. Okay, now what we can see here in addition is, now this may be different on your camera. That's an infrared sensor for when I'm using an infrared remote control to activate the camera, if you will, get it to take a picture or maybe start video recording. Canon do a infrared remote control, the RC6 I think it's called. Other cameras of course will vary. Instead, yours may have a lamp in there, or it may be in the one above, and it's literally a lamp which lights up to help the camera grab focus. Not a fan of the built-in AF assist lamps on cameras because they're just annoying when they go off, because they are quite bright. Plus, when you've got a large lens on with a large lens hood, they do nothing because the lens hood and the lens gets in the way. I would rather use the autofocus assist from a on-camera speed light, which we'll get into much later. Now, taking a look further at the front of the body, we have the body cap on at the moment. Now, you do not need to release the body cap by pressing and holding the lens release. It just slots in its own, and we will open it here to reveal the lens mount. Now, this lens mount will have a marking. This one's red because it uses Canon EF lenses, so it needs to line up with the red dot on the lens to mount it. Lower end cameras may have dual markings like a red and a white to signify using two different types of lenses within that camera manufacturer's system. So you would need to line it up to the relevant dots to fit the lens. Okay, lens mounts typically are metal on the camera. They may be plastic on certain lenses. Not to worry, that's fine. We see the lens contacts where the lens will communicate with the camera body to so the camera can tell it what aperture to shoot at, okay, focus distance and so forth, all that stuff. It will pick up power from the camera to drive the lens's motor for autofocus as well. Now, looking further into the chamber in the camera, we see the mirror, which is currently down at this moment in time. Now, the mirror gives us the image in the prism through the viewfinder. That's how these digital single lens reflex cameras work, and that mirror will flip up out of the way to reveal the sensor during the exposure making process. Now, behind there is a sensor. Well, actually a filter, then a sensor. Some cameras have filters, some don't. This one does, but we can see the sensor in a moment. Now, also, you will see at the top here a little release clip. Your camera will probably have this if it's a DSLR. It's where the focusing screen sits. Now, some of them you can change, some not. Please don't try and change your focus screen yourself if you don't know what you're doing. I've done it before and scratched the focus screen and had to buy another one, so do be careful. And the focus screen will help you in manual focus. If you buy a certain screen, it will help you line up straight lines in your picture and give you a rule of thirds grid overlaid on the focus screen. You can get different types. So we'll open up the sensor. So I'm going to come behind the camera and to go into the sensor cleaning mode. Sensor cleaning, clean now, manual. Boom, there you go. Mirror flips up, as we just heard, and we can see inside the camera there, which is the sensor. Now, if I tilt the body back a little bit, you might see the sensor a little bit more. There it is. Okay, that's a full frame 35mm sensor. It's actually got a filter in front of it, but that's where you clean, or where you get a professional to clean. I clean my own sometimes, but I have started using a professional shop to clean and service the sensor and the cameras. Again, having the body open like this, not really recommended for a long period. I'm doing this for the sake of the video because dust can get inside and so forth. Sensors will get dusty over time, it's inevitable, and they will need cleaning over time. You can do it yourself or take it to a shop, that's up to you. If you kill your own camera, scratch the sensor, that's on you. If they do it, that's on them. Okay, so for the cost of 40 to 50 pounds, it's worth taking it to a shop, I think, sometimes. So I'm going to turn the camera off to lock the mirror back down, turn the camera back on, and I'm going to cover the mirror and the sensor back up. So that's just a quick look at the front of the camera and the layout and the buttons of the camera as a whole. Again, remember this is a primer. It's not your camera that's in front of you here, it's another one. However, most of the buttons and dials do the same thing across all cameras. They may just be laid out slightly differently, and certain features may be called different names. So please bear that in mind. So hopefully this has helped you to get used to your new camera. Certainly a interchangeable lens system camera, and we'll get you out there shooting sooner. More videos are coming up. This one's a bit long, I get that, but more videos coming up about specific features, getting into the fundamentals, exposure and all that stuff. So please bear with me. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the blog in the description below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.